party people of YouTube. Thank you for joining me again for part 3 of the electric guitar series, the first series that I'm doing on this channel. Hope everyone's having a good day. Had a nice little lunch, made a sandwich, ham sandwich with some sharp cheddar on it, pretty good. Some mustard, some pretzels, my favorite to-do snack. Pretzels are my favorite to-do snack, and I'll tell you why. Well, 1, I love salt, but 2, because they don't make your hands all, nasty like a Cheeto would or a potato chip or something, and you got to touch the keyboard and the mouse, and you get everything all greasy. It's gross. Pretzels, they don't do any of that. It's great. So it's my favorite to-do snack, personally. Anyway, has absolutely nothing to do with what we're going to be talking about today. We have some fun stuff planned. I've done some comparisons for us. If you remember in part 2, we went through a lot of plugin information and routing and some other Pro Tools features, key features that I use for electric guitars. Everything from, like I said, organizing, color coding, routing, generally plugin stuff that I use on the guitars, things like that. But at the end, I started talking a little bit about some of the mid-sides processing that I do on guitars. And I was stoked, and I still am. Mid-sides is one of my favorite tricks that I've been using over the last, maybe 4 or 5 years, probably. Yeah, I've become more and more aware of it over the last few years. And I feel like I've really sort of started to hone in the MS processing techniques, specifically in my mixes, thanks to a machine that is objectively probably my, I was about to say my favorite piece of gear. That's tough for me, though, because everything has its own, they're like babies, you don't have your favorites. They all have their own thing that you love about them. Having said that, the Undertone Audio Unfairchild is one of my top pieces of gear I've ever used. Most everything in my mixes end up touching it in some way, shape, or form. If one day we go super deep into a mix, let me know if you'd like to do that, by the way, in the comments. That would be maybe cool. It would be a long one. Maybe dive into a mix where we just spend a couple hours or something picking through a mix of mine and really going through every piece of it that I did for a song. But anyway, yeah, most elements touch the Unfairchild. It does sit on my master bus a lot. My 2 bus. Also, I also kind of sum through it and stem through it throughout the process. So in other words, I'll stem my drums out through it, my bass out through it, my guitars, as we're going to go through today, sometimes vocals. So basically, it's a kind of if there was ever a make something sound sick machine, I would say that's probably the closest thing to it. That and my Massive Passive, the Manly Massive Passive. Those 2 things are sort of like, when in doubt, try those pieces, and it'll probably sound better than it did beforehand. Whether or not you use it or not, that's at your discretion. So anyway, let's dive into some of this stuff here. At the end of the last video, I was talking about this plugin, the Waves Abbey Road TG Mastering Chain. I was saying that I feed this into the outboard gear during printing. I checked my notes. At least on this mix, I did not. I actually did not feed that plugin to the outboard gear. I only fed, once the print was done, I fed it into the master bus and then turned that on. So I wanted to make that clear, because after going through my notes in more detail, after I finished that video to do this one, I saw that I actually had done it that way in this mix. Like I said, I don't typically do things the same every time, so I can't say that's what I've done on another mix. I probably change it up. So, oh boy, this microphone's going to fall again, isn't it? Maybe I need to get a new stand. Maybe I just need to not use this stand. That's a good idea, Mike. Maybe do that next time. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at these stems, and then we're also I'm going to cut away and do a little thing on the Unfairchild where I have the camera up there where you can kind of see some of the moves I make. I won't be able to run audio at the same time, unfortunately, but just because of how it's set up in my studio right now. But I can give you kind of a detailed look once we go over some of this stuff, maybe some of that will make more sense. So anyway, first things first, I made 3 different prints of the same section of the song. I decided to use that chorus and then the solo section, mainly because the solo section, I feel, gives us a really good example of things popping out of the stereo mix, right? So we have a stereo, guitars, and then let's see, get my notes up, and then the guitar, and then the solo guitar punches out through the middle when it happens, okay? So I thought this was a good section to continue to use. Hope you're not bored of it. But we're gonna go through some of that, and also through some of the effect guitars that I feel as if have really been amplified and nuanced during the MS process that I wasn't able to really get to pop prior to that. So it's gonna be fun. Okay, so here we have. Let me sort this out. We have 3 different prints. I have one which was the Unfairchild MS print, which was the one that I used in the actual mix. I did an Unfairchild just stereo print. So not an MS print, but still going through the Unfairchild. And then one where we're not touching the outboard gear at all. I tried to level match these as best as possible. And I think I did a pretty good job of it, actually. The toughest one was the MS Link print because it's just generally the sides are going to feel different during that. But I think I got everything volume about right because I don't want the volume to, artificially trick you into thinking it's better because things that are louder oftentimes are just feel better. This is another one of those videos where, getting ready here, going through these stems, if you're not listening on headphones or monitors, you might want to switch an iPad or an iPhone. Speaker isn't going to show you the nuances of what we're talking about here. So, yeah, I think it's a good idea. Again, a lot of these videos probably, we go through a lot of detail work, a lot of little moves here and there. They all add up to be something big, but maybe a good idea to watch these on headphones or monitors or something like that. So, let's go to, first of all, the no outboard print at all. So we're going to listen to this. This is straight up out of, let me turn this on actually real fast. This is straight up out of our master bus. No mastering chain on the guitar print. So I printed it like that. And let's hear this. Excellent. So, pretty cool, right? Sounds pretty good. I think it does. Now we're going to go to the Unfairchild stereo print. So this is just simply that same thing that I printed in the box, but through the Unfairchild. So no MS encoding at all. Great. Okay, so that sounds pretty dope, not gonna lie. Like, you can obviously hear, again, if I hope you're somewhere where you can hear this, how sick the Unfairchild made that sound. Just those two back to back were like a big difference. And now we're gonna play it one more time, and this is the MS encoded version. And after we're done listening to this, I'm going to explain what the MS encoding process did and why I like it better and why I think it works really well for guitars. Here we go. This is the Unfairchild with an MS Link processing on it. So now we're cooking with gas, as they say. Yeah, I mean, again, just an obvious difference there to me. The stereo field is so much wider. The guitars feel more open, and the depth perception of them, they go from like, well, this thing's in front of me, but here to here, and it goes from here to here. I mean, there's so many things about that version that are exciting to me. That I hope at home you're hearing that as well. I hope that your headphones, or I hope YouTube encodes it in a way that you can really feel that stereo image open up, right? So I'm going to give you a brief explanation of what MS encoding is. I think, you know, if you're more interested in it, let me know. We could do a whole thing about it where I can show you different examples with drums, guitars, even vocals. You know, we could go pretty deep on that. Or, you know, obviously you could look it up on Google as well if you want to know more about it before we get a chance to do that, if that's something we do. But basically, MS encoding is, I wrote a note down because I was trying to think of the best way to explain it sort of in the most basic way possible without sounding like I'm talking about, you know, robots or something like that. It basically encodes mono and stereo channels separately. So what it allows you to do is EQ and or compress the middle of the mix and the sides of the mix independently, rather than when you're applying an EQ or compressor where it's just compressing everything together from all the way left, center, all the way right, and everything in between. This basically splits your image into left, right, and center, and then recombines it to become a stereo image. Yeah, and you basically get what happens with, at least with, take guitars, for instance, you get a much wider stereo image because you're able to process them differently, right? You're able to, kind of like what I was talking about in video 2, almost, I hesitate to use the word trickery, but almost put some auto trickery where you're doing things different on the side, so your ears sort of perceive it as being wider than maybe it is because it's different than what's in the middle. It's not all one thing anymore. It's actually separated, and you're doing something different here than you are here. It's an incredibly powerful tool. It's something that I, like I said, use on a daily basis. Pretty much on every song that I've been doing in the last few years, it shows up somewhere, mainly in guitars. And another cool thing that I want to show you too is, I'm going to mute these stems up here, down here. There's these guitars in this song, right? There's these guitars where in the chorus section, we do this bendy guitar thing. You kind of heard it in there. And I wanted it to really feel like that part was special, right? Like there was something else happening in the song where it wasn't just a bendy guitar, but it was this part that the band was doing together. And so what we came up with after many hours of plugging things in, as I said, and experimentation, we came up with this sort of, well, here, let me play it. I know it sounds simple, but it's just all this, you know, I'll play the left side, the right side. It's this wet, reverbery, echoey, slappy thing that happens, and it happens in center, left, and right. Okay, I wanted it to really feel like the guitars are kind of being overtaken by this thing in the mix. I've refrained from calling it an animal, but sort of this thing that pops out at you and it commands your attention, right? I wanted that to happen in the chorus in that bendy section because I thought it was a special thing that we did. Later on in the song at the very end, we kind of do other stuff with it, I think, if I'm mistaken. Kind of do like a detune thing at the end, but whatever. But in general, that was the production idea between that was this part special. And in my head, believe it or not, as I was tracking this, I had in mind what I wanted to do with it during my MS processing, right? Because I knew that having those big wet guitars on the sides like that, even though there's one in the center too, on the sides would really make the stereo image pop, really make it pop out. And one of the biggest things you probably heard in this print, which is, again, the MS printed version of the song, is in the other versions, the solo guitar was much louder in a way that I think doesn't really work. I mean, again, it's kind of hard because you don't have context of the song as to where the vocal was sitting and then where the lead guitar came in. So it's hard for you to kind of gauge where that is. But I guess trust me. Where I purposely mixed this lead guitar when I was mixing before it was MS processed, I left an extra couple of decibels on that lead guitar because I knew what was going to happen was I was going to compress the sides a little harder, and so everything on the sides was just sort of going to come up. I was going to, use some makeup gain on the sides. I was going to make everything come up on the sides, and the center I wasn't going to do that on. I typically don't because, again, how I do it, or in this instance for this song, is I made the sides seem louder and wider and bigger, right? In the chorus in particular, right? I had that automation going. So that's why in the other prints, in just the stereo version and the version that was stereo through the Unfair Child, you get sort of like too much solo, almost like the guitars on the sides almost seem non-existent. It's kind of weird, actually, how they almost, I don't want to say they disappear, but they definitely take too much of a backseat. And in the MS version, everything's sort of just big and gnarly, and the middle guitar gets pushed down a little bit, mainly because the sides are coming up. So it's not necessarily that the middle is coming down, so the sides are coming up, right? You kind of think about that. So that's essentially a quick overview of MS encoding and how I used it in these guitars to make everything super wide, from the effects in the chorus being super wide and cool to the solo sitting tight and tucked in to the EQ on the sides happening as well, so that I was EQing the sides differently than the middle. And also, I want to bring up this too. I talked about it briefly during the last video, which is this non-lethal applications, I believe their name. Non-lethal applications. Snapshot, which is great because essentially I take a picture of any outboard gear that I'm using and upload it to Dropbox. And then I can upload it into here, into my Pro Tools session as a plugin, and then bring up any of my recall settings. And that's what I did on the Unfair Child. So I'm going to go and just take you over there in a moment and show you these settings and just what they do and just a quick overview of how I use them in this mix on these guitars. The machine is incredibly deep. One of the more complex machines probably I've used. So the possibilities are absolutely limitless fun, I'd like to say. But going over what I did here, attack and release and variable settings and the makeup gain and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to take you over there and give you a quick overview, and then we're going to pop back into Pro Tools and say our goodbyes and maybe listen down once more to the differences so you can kind of intake it all. Okay, cool. All right, folks. So, as promised, I am at my rack over here where the Unfair Child sits. And I'm going to make this short because, this probably isn't the most fun to listen to my voice behind the camera staring at this piece of gear. But these are the settings that I had up in the session for this MS processing. And just to go through it real fast, we have our input gain knob over here. There we go. There we go, right there. I actually wasn't driving this super hard, probably because the guitars were already pretty crunchy, but I mean, I'm not against, just really slamming that thing. And this one I didn't. Threshold also wasn't slamming it, but I was feeding a pretty loud signal into it, so if I would gather, I was probably hitting, I bet, around down 3 or 4 during the louder sections, and maybe down 2 or 3 during the more just regular choruses without the lead, So then over here we have our time constant settings. Now, the Unfair Child has something really cool, which is vary 1 through 4, which if you've ever used a regular or an original Fairchild, not an Unfair Child, but original Fairchild, it only had time constants 1 through 6. And those are predisposed attack and release times. So the Fairchild, you couldn't control attack and release times, but the Unfair Child, Undertone Audio, and my friend Eric built in variable settings, which then take you to, let me see, down here, attack and release settings right here, where we can kind of set up our own custom attack and releases. These were the attack and release settings I had for those guitars. And, in the manual, it basically describes the which each variable setting has. So in other words, each variable setting has a max or minimum attack or release, and then so you set it to whichever one you want, depending on how fast or slow you want things to happen, or how many options you want, I guess. Basically, the parameters of each version of their variable 1 through 4 opens these up to be differently. So in other words, attack at 8 is different in variable 3 than it is in variable 1, right? In this particular case, I used variable 3. Typically for guitars, I end up using variable 2 or 3, depending on how it sounds. I kind of switch between the two and just decide. Now, the really cool thing about this unit is not only does it have MS, which I believe makes channel A mid and then channel B sides, right here, right? But it's got something really cool, which is MS Link, which is incredible. So basically what that does is it makes the channel A and channel B still married together in how they're compressing. So we're not getting separate gain reductions for channel A and channel B. We're getting the same gain reduction at the same time for both channels, despite it being processed differently. To me, a completely incredible engineering feat. You'd have to ask those guys how they did it. If you know anything about Barefoot Recording, where I'm at, Undertone Audio is literally upstairs from me. So I've asked before, and I feel like I haven't completely comprehended exactly how they did it. But maybe over time of asking them again and having them show me schematics over and over, maybe at some point I can start to understand how they achieved this MS Link so wonderfully. So they're wonderful guys, Eric and Larry and Tim Davis and Nick. They're some of my good friends. So definitely check this machine out. It's amazing. If you ever get a chance to use it, it is absolute magic. So let's go back to Pro Tools, and we're going to pick up where we left off and say some goodbyes. All right, and we are back in the driver's seat here. I hope that was informational. I don't work for UTA, so I probably don't do the best job of explaining exactly how those knobs click and turn. All I know is that when I click and turn them, they sound really good. And in the end, that is kind of the only thing that matters, really. So, like I said, in this mix, it was incredibly inspirational and vital to how I got the guitar sound. And as you heard, I don't think it would have sounded even anything like that without that machine. So, or at least MS processing. So you don't have to have an unfairchild MS process. The Fab Filter stuff does MS processing. You see some of the Wave stuff has MS processing. You know, there's different pieces of software that do MS processing really well. And I would absolutely recommend you pick some up and learn it and discuss it and really start to understand how it can make a huge difference in your mixes, whether it be on individual stems, individual parts, or your overall mixes on your mix bus. Try it. Have fun with it. So, this is Mike Pepe signing out of the electric guitar series. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. And let's listen to this MS Stereo thing one more time. What do you think? Come on. Man, I love that. I love that part in the middle with the bendy stuff that I got him to do, and how that plasma pedal sounds so gross, but when he's digging in, you can just hear every nuance of his, you can feel, it's like you can see his fingers going off the fretboard, and at the end, the big reverb pool we do, how we automated that on the knobs. I was turning him as he was playing, but there's so many special things about that solo that I'm just so happy to turn out exactly how I wanted to, and mixing it was a pleasure. Using MS processing made it bigger and wider. All the compression that we used just had everything come out in such the perfect way. It's really exciting stuff. I hope everyone's excited about this stuff as I am. So, have a great day. Take this information and make some beautiful music babies, as I say, in the real world, in your world. If any questions, comments, let me know. Like I said, hit me up on here, my Instagram, my email is there too. Hope to chat soon. Thank you, everybody.